Everyone tells us that glass is a safe option. No plastic, no leaching, no microplastic, right? So when French scientists tested everyday drinks for microplastic, they fully expected that plastic bottles to be the worst offenders. Instead, they found the opposite. Soft drinks, iced teas and beer in glass bottles had 50 times more microplastic than the same drinks in a plastic bottle or can. So what's going on? Is glass worse than plastic? In 2025, France Food Safety Agency ANSES ran a systematic study of microplastic in drinks sold in supermarkets. They tested 56 beverages of different types, which include still and sparkling water, colas and other soft drinks, iced teas and lemonades, beer and wine. And they compared 4 packaging types: glass bottles, plastic bottles, cardboard cartons, and metal cans. To detect microplastics, they filtered the drinks, then used microscopy and polymer analysis to count and identify particles larger than about 10 micrometers. So we are not even talking about the tiniest nanoplastics yet. Now here is the number that shocked them. For popular drinks like cola, lemonade, iced tea and beer, glass bottles averaged around 100 microplastics per liter, about 5 to 50 times more than the same beverages in plastic bottles or cans. The glass itself doesn't shred plastic. So the scientists asked, if the bottle isn't the problem, what is? They took a closer look at the microplastic from the glass bottle drinks. 2 big clues jumped out. Same color. The particles in the drinks were the same color as the paint on the cap. Same polymer. When they analyze the plastic type, it matches the plastic-based paint used on the metal caps. Then they examined the caps themselves and the magnification and found tiny scratches in the paint coating, too small to see with the naked eye. Here is the mechanism they concluded. Glass bottles for soda, iced tea, beer, and many other drinks are sealed with painted metal caps. During bulk storage and transport, caps rub and clink against each other. This friction abrades the paint, creating the microplastic flakes. When the cap is crimped onto the bottle, pressure changes during filling. Some of those flakes fall inside. Result, the drink ends up with significant load of microplastic, even though the container itself is inert glass. To test this, the lab did controlled experiments. They filled perfectly clean glass bottles with filtered water, then sealed them with caps that were not cleaned, air-blown and rinsed. With uncleaned cap, they found around 287 particles per liter in the water. After just blowing air on the cap, that dropped to 106 particles per liter. With blowing plus rinsing, it fell further to about 87 per liter. So the contamination followed the cap, not the glass. Why did the plastic bottle look better in the study? That sounds literally hard to believe in 2025. There are 3 key reasons, and they are all about where you measure and what size you look at. Most plastic bottles are sealed with plastic caps that aren't painted with brittle, flaking coatings in the same way. They are still plastic contacts, but not the same painted metal or metal friction you see in caps for glass. The French study mainly counted microplastic down to 10 micrometers. Anything smaller than that, they mostly missed. At that scale, the cap paint on the glass bottle turned out to be a huge source. For plastic bottles, the biggest problem appears at a smaller scale: nanoplastics, leaching from the bottle walls, which this particular method barely sees. Carbonated soft drinks in these plastic bottles are often single-used, filled and drunk relatively quickly. The glass is heavier and reused in many supply chains. Caps and crates experience more friction and handling before the bottle gets to you, giving more opportunities for paint to abrade. So in this specific experiment, for the size range, they measured glass bottle sodas and beers looked worse mainly because of the cap paint shredding, while plastic bottles' main problem moves into the nanoplastic range. And that the study flagged, but did not fully quantify. And that doesn't make plastic safe. It just means the dominant problem was different depending on the packaging. Now let's talk about the weird outline of wine. Wine in the study was mostly in glass bottles too, but unlike soda and beer, wine showed very low microplastic levels across all packaging, often similar to or even below the plastic in carton. But why? Researchers noticed one big difference: the closure system. Beer, soda, iced tea usually closed with painted metal caps, exactly the type that was flaking microplastic. Most wine bottles closed with cork stoppers, sometimes with a decorative capsule, but not the same kind of friction exposed crown cap. A follow-up interpretation by the team and external commentators made a strong suggestion. For wine, the cork functions as a barrier, eliminating the need for painted crown caps that can shred microplastic. The ANSES summary explicitly notes glass containers were more contaminated than the other packaging for all drinks except wine, a difference attributed to the use of cork stoppers instead of screw caps. So wine isn't magic. It's the glass plus cork system simply avoids the specific cap design that was contaminating other glass bottle drinks. So does this mean glass is bad and plastic is good? Not really. What this study shows is more nuanced. Glass as a material is basically non-reactive. It doesn't create microplastic. But the way we seal the glass bottles right now often does. The enemy was the cap paint, not the glass. Plastic and cans can still contribute microplastics, especially at nanoscales or through internal coatings. This French work didn't fully capture the tiniest particles. The practical takeaway scientists and regulators are talking about things we can do. Use different coatings or no brittle plastic paints where it can abrade. Change storage transport practices so caps don't grind against each other. The ANSES lab showed that even simple air blowing and rinsing of caps before sealing cuts microplastic transfer dramatically from 287 to 87 particles per liter in test bottles. So the headline isn't glass is worse than plastic, it's design details matter. And even safe material can become contamination source if you ignore the small stuff. So if there is a rule of thumb, here is this. Don't just ask, is it glass or plastic? Ask, how is it made, sealed, stored and measured? Because as the study shows, sometimes the problem is in the bottle you see, but the tiny flakes you can't. And thank you so much for your time today. If you enjoy this, please consider subscribing and check out the echo verses at the end of the video. Thank you. It's uncomfortable to admit this, but most things don't fail because they were bad. They fail because of something small that no one paid attention to. The bottle didn't break, the material didn't fail. It was just a tiny detail repeating over and over again until it changed what was inside. And if you're honest, life works the same way. You don't fall behind because you're not good enough. You fall behind because of small things you keep ignoring, the doubt you keep listening to, the habit you keep excusing, and the things you tell yourself don't matter. Nothing dramatic, just small things quietly deciding your direction. And that's the part no one likes because it means it was never really out of your control. But it also means something else. It means you're not as stuck as you think. If small things can quietly pull you off track, they can just as quietly pull you back. Not in one big moment, not all at once, but small shifts repeated enough times to change what ends up inside your life. And remember, you're way stronger than you believe. Your potential is limitless. Remember to make that one change. You're unbreakable if you could believe in yourself. A random shout out to our community members to show my appreciation for your support. Thank you.